Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Andre and I'm your bookworm, and today we are back on book content. We are reviewing The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. So yeah, we're back on the Dandelion Dynasty, which is a series written by Ken Liu. This is the second book called The Wall of Storms. I've read the first book, The Grace of Kings. If you want to check out the review of that book, you can go on the thumbnail or the cards up above and see what I think about the first book and then jump back into it. Or if you're just keen for some Ken Liu content, I've also reviewed a short story anthology that he wrote called The Paper Menagerie and Other Stories, and you can also check out the review here on the channel. Just go through the thumbnail or cards, whatever you choose. And if you're here for this book in specific, then let's get on with it. So what is the Dandelion Dynasty about? This is an epic fantasy, Asian inspired, with lots of political intrigue, all that jazz mixed together. This book was initially published in 2016, so it's close to celebrating its 10th year anniversary, and at the time it was nominated for the Locus Award. However, it did not win it, unfortunately. I don't know what books were competing with it, but I bet they were very good, because this book, let me tell you right away, it's good. I enjoyed it, so I expect the ones that were competing to be even better. On Goodreads, this book has just over 9,000 ratings of recording of this video, which was surprising to me because I thought Ken Liu was more famous than that we would have a lot more ratings. I mean, a lot more, at least 10,000 or more. But anyways, the amount of ratings it has allowed it to have an average score of 4.38 out of 5, which is pretty good in my opinion. I mean, that for a fantasy book is quite good, and it sits definitely on a good range. But now, will I match what I think? I already kind of spoiled it a bit, but let's get on with our housekeeping items before jumping into the review. The first one is the synopsis. If you're curious about what this book is about, I'm going to narrate the synopsis for you. If you don't want to know anything, because in the end this is the second book, there might be spoilers of the first one, or I can say right away that there are spoilers about the first one, just skip to the timestamp, the next one, and you'll jump right into the review of this book, alright? Hope I've given enough time, so let's go. Dara is united under the Emperor Ragin, once known as Kunigaru, the Bandit King. There has been peace for 6 years, but the Dandelion throne rests on bloody foundations. Kuni's betrayal of his friend Matazindu, the Hegemon. The Hegemon's rule was brutal and unbending, but he died well, creating a legend that haunts the new emperor, no matter what good he strives to do. Where warworms forged unbreakable bonds between Kuni's inner circle, peace now gnaws at their loyalties. Where ancient wisdoms once held sway, a brilliant scholar promises a philosophical revolution. And from the far north, over the horizon, comes a terrible new threat. The scent of blood is in the water. And that is it for synopsis. Now, the only thing left is to look at the review of the first book, because we need to get a sense of where the book was struggling, where the book was good. And so for the first book, The Grace of Kings, it got a score of 4 out of 5. Now, why did it get a 4 only? The big thing was that it was very confusing. There were a lot of names. We had peoples, we had cultures, we had lands, we had gods, we had animals, we had flora. We had everything with a new name, and that was very overwhelming, very confusing. Nonetheless, it was still a good book. The characters, I could see great work in them, although, of course, with the struggling part, but there was a lot of promising parts in this first book, and also a few things that weren't as good. So a 4 out of 5 was the score that it got. So let's dive into these categories just to see how the Wall of Storms fared. First category is plot, and let me tell you that the plot improved by a lot. I thought because this series was called the Dandelion Dynasty, we would pretty much, each book would be a different generation of this dynasty, and I thought, okay, we're gonna have to face, first of all, a whole lot of new characters, new names. It's going to be confusing again, but then it will also be a completely different plot because it won't be very related to the previous book. So I was a bit hesitant, but I got into the book, and we basically follow from a few years after the events of the first book, but not that many. So I remember the names, I could still remember the characters. It was great, and I could just start off running and enjoy the book right away. I mean, of course, the time passes and our characters age, they have kids and etc. but it was still close enough to the first book that the gap wasn't too drastic or too jarring. So I usually compare this type of writings with Jade Legacy because Jade Legacy had a lot of breaks and some of them weren't that big, but I think the problem with Jade Legacy was the amount of breaks that existed and the continuity between them. Whereas with The Wall of Storms, it feels like there were some breaks, but there was continuity in them in the sense that the breaks, the gaps, didn't have anything important in them. And so we could just witness the big moments, the most important developments, and some lulls, some moments that were a bit slower, but they were important for the characters or for the world building or for the plot itself. And I mean, this book has surprise after surprise, twist after twist, all to keep it super engaging and to grab your heartstrings and just twist them till you're just keen to read more. This book reminded me a lot of two other series that I enjoy a lot. One of them is The Magician by Raymond E. Feist, and the other one is Daughter of the Empire series, written also by Raymond E. Feist, but also by Jenny Words. I think those two, they had some similarities in them. The political intrigue, definitely from Daughter of the Empire, the world building or the plot more towards The Magician, but both of them amazing. No, the three of them are amazing books. I could recommend the three of them very, very much. So as you can tell by now, this category for me is a 5 out of 5. Next is characters, and in the first book, I enjoyed the characters, but I would say more or less only through a third or halfway through the book. This is because at the start, it was very confusing to understand who was who. A lot of them were children, and then we would go back and see their whole backstory before going back to the present. So it was a bit confusing, and it took me a while to fully understand all the characters. In this book, it became much easier because, again, we are following a lot of the same characters from the first book, so there isn't that time to recognize who is who or get used to their way of thinking. So it was a lot more easy to start the book and just enjoy the characters as they were. And then, of course, we have a few new characters that we get introduced and that we get them developed. We had plenty of backstory for these as well, but because there were fewer, it was easier to keep up with them. And the amazing thing is that none of these characters feel superficial. Even we have our main protagonists, we have some secondary characters that are still very well developed. They seem to be super relevant for the plot itself and for the world, but they seem to be real people just like our main protagonists. And that is really what we want, because we want a fully fleshed world, especially with epic fantasy and epic science fiction as well. We want all the characters to feel like they are real, and therefore when you have situations where the whole world is in danger, you feel, oh no, all of these people, not only our main characters, but the secondary characters and all of the other ones, they're all super important because, again, they feel real. And the beautiful thing is also Ken Liu writes equally strong characters, be they male, female, whatever. All of them look like great role models for the ones that are supposed to be role models. And I think the way he writes doesn't discriminate really. It's not like we see some of those science fiction authors from back when they were quite sexist towards women. No, this does not happen here whatsoever. And of course, this is due to the artistry of writing from Ken Liu. But that's also about the writing style, and so I'll leave that for that category. For this one, it's going to be a 5 out of 5. Now we have world building to talk about, which in the first book, there was also a lot of potential for it to be amazing. However, it was also very complex, which made it suffer a bit. It backfired because it was so big and so complex that I, at least as a reader, felt a bit distanced from it because I didn't know how much effort I needed to put to actually figure out what was important or not for the world. But now, with this second installment, we know the majority of things, so we don't need to learn new things. Of course, there are still new things, like new names, new plants, new animals, whatsoever, but it's not as heavy as it was in the first book. There's less confusion, that's for sure, and because of that, Ken Liu is able to add onto it and to expand the world. I mean, the world was big enough already. We have a continent, multiple islands, but then we also get added a new continent. Not that we get to explore much that one, but it definitely adds immediately a level of complexity. But the thing is, that continent doesn't feel like a superficial plotline. It feels like it's very vital, and at the same time, I think Ken Liu doesn't bombard us with everything about that continent. We still have our home place, we are still having a lot of things happening there. And so we only visit that place from time to time. We get to learn a bit, go back to home base, then learn a bit again, go back to home base. And so it allows us to grasp everything better. And the fact that this continent suddenly appeared, don't worry, it's coherent with the story. Ken Liu is able to weave a justification even towards the fact that the gods didn't or weren't able to acknowledge that place. Everything makes sense, everything has a reason, and those reasons I think were done very well. I think Ken Liu clearly thinks ahead about what he needs to do to make sure that things are coherent and that everything makes sense in the story without breaking our sensibility. So for this category, it's also going to be a 5 out of 5. And now let's talk about the category I mentioned before, which is writing style. I mean, Ken Liu's writing can be a lot if you're not paying attention. And even if you are, it can still be a lot to take in. I mean, there's lots of everything. And if you don't pay attention to the names, you're going to miss it, you're going to be confused. And this book is no exception. There are still the same number, if not more, names to know what they are. So take that into account when you think about reading these books. I don't think it was as disturbing for the reading process as it was in the first book, none whatsoever, because a lot of them we already grasped from the first book, so we can integrate it into the second book. It becomes more natural to the reader. But of course, it might take you some time to get into the rhythm of the book, and that depends from person to person. And another thing to mention is Ken Liu's fondness to take you back through memory lane, because a lot of times it happens, we meet a character, and the next chapter we go back to almost from where they were born, and we get to see their whole life until that moment in the present. It doesn't happen too often in this book, but it still happens. And if you don't like that type of flashbacks, then it might not be really your type of book. Again, in the first book, it confused me more than it did in this one. This one, I understand more his writing style, was more used to it, I enjoyed it a lot more for what it was. But in regards to pacing, what can I say? It was brilliant. I think Ken Liu was able to have those peaks and valleys. Some valleys might have been a bit too long, or there might have been a bit too much complexity that was taking me a bit out, but I think it was still really good. I think Ken Liu is able to know how to surprise the reader, when to bring up the expectations and the heat, and then boom, give you that surprise or that twist and leave you wanting to read more, not only the next chapter, but even the next book. So for this category, I'm giving it a 4 plus out of 5. Not only a 5 because, again, some of the parts were still a bit clunky, but I am really hopeful that in the next book, that clunkiness is gone. And finally, we have enjoyment as our last category. And after finishing the first book, my enjoyment was a bit hesitant, because when I thought about reading the second book, I thought, oh my god, I'm gonna have to think about a whole bunch of names. The plot is gonna be a bit chaotic. The world building is gonna be chaotic. I don't know how much energy I want to devote to it. So when I started reading it, my enjoyment was maybe a bit of a 3, but as I kept reading and I realized, oh, okay, this is actually different. This has improved quite a lot. My enjoyment started climbing. I don't think it ever got to a 5 completely, but definitely had his ups and downs, more ups than downs. And like I mentioned, some of those valleys in terms of pacing might have been a bit too long, and I might have taken a bit too long to read because I wasn't as enjoying it as much. But it was still a really strong book. I think maybe some parts he could have left for the next book, or maybe not include them. But as it stands, again, great book. For this category, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. And I think that a reread of this book would be even better, because you know already what's happening. You can see that foretelling, that foreshadowing that exists, and enjoy in that sense. And that leads us to the end of our review. Just as a refresher, we have 5 for plot, 5 for characters and world building, and then a 4 plus for writing style and 4 for enjoyment. And that gives us a final score of 4.6 out of 5, or you can consider maybe a 4.7 with that plus, but pretty much a better score than the first book and the better score than the Goodreads score. So what can I say in comparison to the first book? Huge improvement. Ken Liu improved not only the plot, the characters, but the world building, which are main things if you want a series to keep going and to just be better and better with each installment. So he did a really good job in terms of just this book in general. If I had read only the first and I stopped it, I don't know how many people I would recommend it to, but reading this second one, Wall of Storms, I'm definitely recommending it to a lot more people. And I can understand why this book has such a good score on Goodreads. I mean, mine is a bit higher, of course, but still, like, it's a really good score on Goodreads, and I can understand why so many people love it, because it's really, really good if you like this type of books with Asian-inspired, epic fantasy, and political intrigue. I'm very curious to see how the next two books fare, because I don't know where he's going to take it. I mean, I have some suspicions, but nonetheless, I think it will be great, and I cannot wait to read more. But now it's your turn. What do you think? Have you read this book? Are you curious to read this book? Or have you read other Ken Liu books and you're not that interested? Comment down below and let me know. And if you're new, of course, don't forget to subscribe, like the content, and you shall be seeing me on Thursdays and Sundays, okay? See you soon.